Welcome to Presidential Fight Club, the show that answers the question, if all 44 presidents fought each other one-on-one, who would win? Hosted by two history professors who have too much time on their hands, Scott Rank and James Early. Hey everyone, welcome to Presidential Fight Club. We're working our way through round 2. We have a founding father in this round, James Monroe. He's squaring off against Andrew Johnson, who was victorious against James Madison. So Monroe has a Monroe Doctrine of foreign policy. But James, what is the Monroe Doctrine of pain?
The Monroe Doctrine of pain?
Sure.
You got me on that one, man. The Monroe Doctrine. Okay. The Monroe Doctrine, of course, if are you referring to the thing where we said to Europe, don't come over and mess with our side of the world? Is
Sure.
that what you mean?
Yes.
Well, Monroe was not afraid to tell people what to do and what they need, what they can and cannot do. When he was president, he famously issued a statement, which was written by John Quincy Adams, but certainly was approved of by the President Monroe, that European nations are not welcome to come over and colonize Latin American or any American, meaning North American or Central American or South American countries. But long before that, when Monroe was a young man, the Revolutionary War broke out. He was in college, and like a lot of people at the time, James Monroe quit school to join the Army because he wanted to go fight and show his manliness. And Monroe ended up being a very young officer. He served in the Battle of Trenton under Captain William Washington. I don't know if there's a relation to George Washington, but ultimately he was under George Washington because George Washington, of course, was the commander at Trenton. And he led a charge along with his captain on the British camp, and both of them were shot. Monroe had a bullet in his shoulder, and his captain was incapacitated, but he was not. Even though he had this bullet in his shoulder, he just kept on fighting, and he took over command of the company, and he led his company on to victory, just like the entire American force at Trenton. They surprised a group of Hessians, mercenaries, and defeated them and captured pretty much every single one of them that they didn't kill. So Monroe was a tough guy. He got shot, and he just kept on fighting. One other story about Monroe is that he kept this toughness even when he was an adult, even when he was president. By the way, I need to stop and say that he was a fairly large guy, 6 foot even, and about 190 pounds. He was definitely had a soldier's mentality. Monroe, at one point during his presidency, he had a dinner for visiting foreign diplomats, and one of the diplomats can be very thin-skinned, we know sometimes. One of them offended one of the other ones, and they rushed off to another room, and they lifted their swords, and they were about to duel. Monroe, as president, mind you, pulled out his own sword and joined them. And he took up his arms. He said, "No, you break this up, stop, or I'm going to break it up for you." So, yes, Monroe was always itching for a fight. It's like he had a chip on his shoulder. He served as Secretary of State going back to before his presidency, when his predecessor James Madison was president. He was Secretary of State. And during the War of 1812, the Secretary of Defense at the time was not really doing his job. And so basically Monroe took over that job as well. He did two jobs at once, and he rode out into battle, and he personally rallied troops outside of Washington. So he definitely had a lot of courage and a lot of fighting spirit. And he was raised in a fairly wealthy environment, so he wouldn't have done a lot of physical labor as a child, but he not only knew how to fight, but he loved to fight.
Okay, well, he is squaring off against Andrew Johnson. Johnson was victorious against James Madison in the last round, mostly because Madison was 5'4" and 100 pounds, so it's almost a win by default. But Johnson does bring some things to the fight. He has military experience. He served in the Tennessee Militia in the 1830s. He was the military governor of Tennessee in 1862. He served in the Civil War. He was a Brigadier General in the U.S. Army. He's described physically as stocky and well-proportioned, with a square jaw, cleft chin, large nose. His health was generally good. He suffered from kidney stones as president, so if that comes up in the fight, that'll take him out. He began wearing reading glasses in his 50s, so his vision is apparently good up until then. As James mentioned in the last fight, he comes from a common background like Abraham Lincoln, growing up in a log cabin. We don't remember that aspect of him. We don't remember him romantically due to, well, his racism and how he hampered the Reconstruction efforts and the attempts at reconciliation following the Civil War. But he did have common roots. He identified with the underdog throughout his life. He even shuns Washington society and prefers the company of old friends. But he carries himself with great dignity throughout his life and had a very strong presence, as some people described him, and also speaking bluntly and in a cold manner. So he sort of, I guess you could say he has gravitas, he has military experience, he's fairly well built. So this is where I place Johnson, saying that he could take out another founding father. But can he take out another founding father? What's the result of this fight?
Well, I'm afraid that Andrew Johnson's military desk experience just doesn't stack up against his desk. Yeah, you're a military governor. Whoop-de-doo. Why don't you take on somebody who got shot under and fought under George Washington? So Monroe wins pretty easily.
It's so easy to build up these military credentials on paper back in the 1700s, 1800s that, yes, I was a general. Now, I never fired a pistol before, but those commissions can just take you right to the top back then.
Definitely. If you had connections or if you just were in the right place at the right time, like Andrew Johnson. Let's see. Do we have any other Tennessee Southerners who stayed loyal to the Union? Not very many. So you're it, buddy.
Win by default. That's one way to go through life. Okay, well, in the next round, or in the next fight of round 2, we're going to see a president show up who sailed through round 1 because he was seated, and that is George Washington. He's going up against our returning champion, John Tyler. Thanks for listening to Presidential Fight Club. If you'd like to download your own printable bracket sheets for each regional tournament so you can guess how the tournament will go, check out presidentialfightclub.com. We'd appreciate it if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts as well. Thanks for listening, and may you fight with the stamina of Teddy Roosevelt, the courage of George Washington, and the reach of Abraham Lincoln.